Welcome back, grinders, to Daily Grind. We're doing another one on mental health and trauma, and why trauma makes you brutally fucking honest. Trauma doesn't give you wisdom, it gives you intolerance. Not for people, for bullshit. You don't become brutally honest because you're trying to be edgy or authentic. You become brutally honest because your brain stopped believing in the social lies that keep fragile systems upright. You already watched one version of reality collapse. You're not interested in pretending this one's stable either. So when people say you're a little intense, what they really mean is you're not playing along and now I feel exposed. Well, good.
This is Daily Grind. I don't do safe topics, trigger warnings, or corporate-friendly bullshit. No subject is off limits. Political, true crime, history, or whatever else gets the gears grinding in your head. I grind into reality like it owes me rent.
Politeness is a luxury behavior. It's what people develop when their environment has rails, when the rules are mostly enforced, when mistakes are embarrassing, not catastrophic, when the worst case scenario is a tense HR conversation and not irreversible damage. It exists in systems where the cost of being wrong is a social discomfort. If you've lived through actual threat, your nervous system learned a different math equation. It learned that delay has consequences. That miscommunication multiplies risk. That assumption gets people hurt. That "I thought you meant" can turn into something permanent. So your brain doesn't romanticize politeness, it elevates it. It evaluates it. And here's what it concludes. Politeness does not stop bad outcomes. Clarity sometimes does. That's not cynicism, that's pattern recognition. When you've been in situations where hesitation got punished, unclear orders caused chaos, soft language created loopholes, silence allowed dysfunction to metasize, your system adapts. Trauma teaches you that hesitation gets punished. Not every time, but enough times. It only takes a few real experiences where you pause and it costs you. You assume good intent and got burned. You stayed quiet and the situation escalated. Your brain doesn't need 10,000 repetitions. It needs a few high-intensity ones. And that's how conditioning works. The amygdala doesn't care about office etiquette. It cares about outcome. So it flags vagueness as risk. Vagueness gets exploited. Because vague language creates space, and space is where manipulation lives. I didn't say that. That's not what I meant. You misunderstood. I thought we were on the same page. Trauma survivors hear those phrases and their nervous system fucking tightens. Because they've seen that page flip mid-sentence. So they stop speaking in maybes. They stop cushioning with "I feel like," "maybe we could," "it's probably nothing," but they say, "This is the issue. This doesn't work. This is unacceptable. This needs to change." Not because they enjoy confrontation, because they've seen what avoidance grows into. Silence gets interpreted however it's most convenient for whoever's in charge. That one hits harder than people admit. When you stay silent, power fills in the blanks. If you don't state your boundary, someone defines it for you. If you don't clarify your position, someone reframes it. If you don't document your stance, someone rewrites the narrative. Trauma teaches you this the hard way. So you just stop leaving blanks. You stop trusting that people will do the right thing if you just remain agreeable. Sometimes the person in charge benefits from ambiguity, and your nervous system remembers that. Psychologically, this is about control restoration. After trauma, your brain becomes allergic to helplessness. One way it fights helplessness is through precision. Precision language, precision in boundaries, precision in expectations. It's not aggression, it's risk management. The cold truth, people who've never had real stakes confuse comfort with safety. You don't. You know comfort can coexist with danger. You know smiling can coexist with betrayal. You know polite rooms can still be unsafe. So you stop cushioning your words, because cushioning feels like gambling, and your nervous system doesn't gamble anymore. It calculates, it measures, it reduces variables. If that reads as harsh, so be it. Your brain isn't trying to win a popularity contest. It's trying to make sure you never again end up getting blindsided by something you could have named out loud. And with clarity and reassurance, when a trauma brain doesn't know the outcome, or they don't know the answer to a question or something they're wondering, Their amygdala, their threat detection system, will fill in the blank parts with the worst possible scenario. My brain does that shit all the fucking time, and it's annoying as all hell, but you have to fight through it and learn how to shut it off. Your nervous system is rewired around efficiency, not likability after trauma. Your amygdala clocks risk before your mouth opens. We talked about that, about nervous systems and how they love chaos if you've dealt with trauma. Your prefrontal cortex doesn't bother dressing it up because dressing it up never saved anyone. You don't speak softly because your body doesn't believe softness is protective. You speak directly because your system associates directness with survival. The translation to that: polite people get run over. Clear people get labeled difficult. You already know which one you'd rather be. Small talk feels fucking stupid because it is. And I hate small talk. I'd rather just sit there in silence, even though it's uncomfortable. Let's dig deeper into the part where everyone pretends small talk is normal, and you're the weird one for not enjoying it. You're not broken, you're just not domesticated. Let's stop pretending small talk isn't evil. It's just irrelevant once you've seen real stakes. Small talk is basically a social ping, like dolphins clicking at each other to confirm they're not about to get eaten. It's not meant to be meaningful, it's meant to be safe. How are you? How's the weather? Busy day? That's not conversation, that's a system check. For most people, that's fine because their nervous system is set to default. They can float in low-stakes reality and treat language like a gentle massage for social atmospheres. You've lived through real stakes. Your system doesn't treat language like a massage. It treats it like a tool. So when someone asks, how are you, without wanting the answer, your brain doesn't go along with the script anymore. Because your brain is not hearing words. It's hearing intent. And the intent is usually, give me the socially acceptable response so I can feel like we connected without either of us having to actually connect. That's why it lands wrong. It hears the lie. Not a lie like, I'm secretly a spy. A lie like, this question has meaning. It's a ritual question. A checkbox, a polite knock on a door they don't actually want opened. And trauma survivors can't unsee that. Because trauma makes you fluent in subtext. You've had to read rooms for danger, mood shifts, hidden motives, and incoming bullshit. So now your brain detects performative language instantly. It feels the performative nonsense because trauma changes your relationship with reality. After trauma, you don't just talk to people, you scan them. Tone, eyes, timing, energy, the little inconsistencies. So when someone smiles and asks, how are you? While already looking past you, your nervous system goes, this isn't connection, this is a social placeholder. And placeholders feel insulting when you've lived through the opposite of a placeholder life. You've been through moments where words mattered, where are you okay wasn't a greeting, it was a fucking lifeline. Where, what's going on, Matt? Tell me now so we can survive this. So casual versions of those questions feel like someone using emergency language as a decoration. That's why you check out. It's not laziness. You're not being antisocial. It's your system refusing to spend energy on a script that has no payoff. Trauma messes with your energy economics. Your brain starts budgeting social effort like it's ammo. Is this person real? Is this interaction useful? Is there any safety here? Or is this another performance where I'm expected to play normal human number 7? And if the answer is performance, your system pulls back. You're not bad at socializing. You can socialize, you've done it. You probably do it when it's real, when it matters, when the person isn't just making noise to fill space. What you're bad at is playing along with fake intimacy. You just don't tolerate fake intimacy. Because fake intimacy is the cousin of manipulation. Not always, but often enough that your brain lumps them together. Fake intimacy is where someone wants the warm glow of connection without any responsibility. And for some reason, I'm having a lot of trouble pronouncing intimacy, so I had to edit out a few little things. They want your friendliness, they want your attention, your emotional labor, but they don't want your truth, your complexity, your pain, your needs. So they keep it shallow, safe, scripted. And if you've been through trauma, shallow doesn't feel light. It feels like a trap door. Dark humor truth is that people want good vibes because they're terrified of real emotions. You're not terrified of emotions, you've been trapped in them. So watching others treat authenticity like hazard signs makes you impatient. And that impatience is not rudeness. It's your nervous system saying, stop pretending we're connecting if you're not actually here. Because once you've had reality strip you down to pure bones, you don't have the respect for conversations that exist purely to avoid reality. That's why small talk isn't evil, it's just irrelevant. It's background music for people who still believe the world is stable. You know better. Trauma permanently changes salience. That's not motivational poster language, that's neuroscience. Salience is your brain's internal spotlight. It decides what matters, what doesn't, and what gets priority access to your emotional bandwidth. Before trauma, most people's salience system runs like this: social approval, comfort, belonging, minor inconveniences, ego threats, embarrassment. Those things feel big because nothing bigger has hijacked the system. After trauma, the spotlight gets hijacked and recalibrated. The brain says, oh, that's not what real danger feels like. Noted. And once it logs that, everything else gets ranked. Safety, truth, control, predictability. Maybe somewhere far down the list, vibes. This isn't philosophical, it's adaptive. Your amygdala becomes more sensitive. Your hippocampus tags memories with emotional intensity. Your nervous system becomes quicker to detect threat cues. It's not that you're constantly panicking, it's that your brain has updated its operating priorities. You've seen how fast life can shift. Your brain does not treat mild inconvenience as catastrophic. It treats it as data, annoying data, but not existential. So when someone melts down over a late delivery, a slightly rude comment, or a schedule change, your nervous system doesn't match their energy. It doesn't go, oh no, this is terrible. It goes, this is what we're allocating adrenaline to. The whole, it is what it is saying. And here's the uncomfortable psychology. Empathy is easier when your nervous system isn't constantly scanning for real threats. After trauma, your baseline arousal is often slightly elevated. You're not hysterical, you're just not sedated by normalcy. So when someone reacts intensely to something minor, your body doesn't automatically join them. It calculates contrast. You've seen real loss, real danger, real chaos, real consequences. So your brain struggles to inflate small problems to match their emotional display. Not because you're heartless, because your salient system refuses to lie. You've watched situations go from normal to catastrophic in minutes. You've seen how thin the illusion of control actually is. You know how quickly a phone call can change everything. And now, you're supposed to treat a late sandwich like a personal tragedy. Fuck no. That doesn't mean you lack compassion, it means your nervous system doesn't burn calories on theatrics. Trauma creates what psychologists sometimes call a contrast distortion. Once your brain has processed high-intensity experiences, low-intensity stressors feel muted. Your system doesn't spike the same way, and sometimes when others spike hard over something small, your reaction isn't empathy, it's disbelief. Because to your nervous system, they're reacting as if the building is on fire, when what you can clearly see is a flickering light bulb. That mismatch creates tension. They feel overwhelmed. You feel detached. They feel validated by group sympathy. You feel like you're watching a rehearsal for a crisis that doesn't exist. People who haven't recalibrated their salience system live in a world where comfort equals safety. You don't. You know comfort can evaporate. You know stability is conditional. You know life doesn't negotiate. So your brain saves its full emotional response for things that actually threaten stability. Everything else, it gets assessed, measured, and filed under fuck that. And when someone demands you emotionally inflate something you know isn't catastrophic, your nervous system resists. Not because you're superior, because your brain already did the math. You're not broken, you're calibrated differently. And once your salience system updates like that, it doesn't downgrade back to DoorDash crisis mode. It just fucking doesn't. Brutal honesty is armor, not a personality. Brutal honesty is defensive architecture. It's not some noble moral stance, it's structural reinforcement. After trauma, your brain stops building with drywall and starts putting up concrete. Because you learn something most people don't want to accept. Ambiguity is a weapon. Not always, but often enough. When you've lived through manipulation, power imbalance, chaotic systems, or environments where narratives shift depending on who's talking, you stop trusting soft edges. Soft edges are where people get cut. So brutal honesty becomes load-bearing. It's not about being right, it's about being untouchable. Untouchable doesn't mean superior, it means defensible. When everything is said clearly, there's no room for reinterpretation, no room for gaslighting, no room for, that's not what I meant, no room later for weaponization, because weaponization thrives on vagueness. Gaslighting requires ambiguity, blame shifting requires gray areas, power games require plausible deniability. Trauma survivors learn this the hard way. If you speak vaguely, someone else controls the narrative. If you hint instead of state, someone else fills in the blanks. If you assume shared understanding, someone later claims misunderstanding. So your brain adapts. It starts speaking in full sentences instead of emotional smoke signals. This is what happened. This is what I said. This is what I meant. This is what I will not tolerate. That precision is armor. Psychologically, this is about restoring agency. Trauma often involves a moment or many moments where your agency was compromised. You didn't have control, you didn't have leverage, you didn't have the ability to shape the outcome. The nervous system hates that, so it overcorrects in areas it can't control. Language becomes territory. You control the wording, you control the framing, you control the clarity. And if the wording is airtight, it's harder for someone to distort it later. This isn't paranoia, it's pattern learning. Your brain says, if it's explicit, it's safer. If it's documented, it's safer. If it's direct, it's safer. And the cold part is brutal honesty also reduces emotional dependency. If you say exactly what you think and feel, you don't need someone to decode you correctly. You remove the hope that they'll just understand. Because hope is vulnerable, clarity is not. That's why brutal honesty can feel intimidating to others. It removes leverage. They can't twist your words. They can't pretend confusion. They can't subtly reframe what you meant. They can't play dumb later. And people who rely on subtlety to maintain control don't like that. It forces accountability. Most people are comfortable with honesty as long as it's soft enough to ignore. They want truth with padding, truth that can be negotiated, truth that comes with emotional disclaimers. Trauma survivors don't always provide disclaimers, not because they lack empathy, because they've seen what happens when disclaimers are used against you. When you say, I feel like maybe this is an issue, someone hears weakness. When you say, this is an issue, someone hears a boundary. One invites discussion, the other establishes a perimeter. And if you've been through enough chaos, you stop inviting. You fortify. That's what defensive architecture is. It's walls built from experience. It's language designed not to impress, but to withstand pressure. It's not about dominating the room. It's about never again being cornered in it. Brutal honesty can make relationships harder because intimacy requires vulnerability and defensive architecture limits exposure. But from your nervous system's perspective, that's acceptable collateral. Better strategically isolated than strategically dismantled. So no, brutal honesty isn't always about truth as a virtue. Sometimes it's about survival as a policy. And once your brain learns that clarity keeps you intact, it doesn't downgrade back to soft edges just because someone prefers comfort. Concrete doesn't apologize for not being drywall. Trauma survivors don't distrust ambiguity because they're dramatic. They distrust it because ambiguity is where power abuse hides. Ambiguity is the camouflage of manipulation. It is where someone can say, I never said that. That's not what I meant. You're overreacting. You're misunderstood. You misunderstood. And I hear you're overreacting all the time. Yeah, well, sorry. And technically, they're right enough to escape accountability. Your brain learned this pattern somewhere along the way. Maybe in chaos, maybe in institutions, maybe in relationships, maybe in systems where the rules change depending on who is talking. But it logged it. If it's vague, it can be twisted. Vague language leaves space. Space for reinterpretation. Space for narrative shifts. Space for denial. Space for power to rewrite the past. Trauma survivors hate narrative shifts. Because once you've lived through situations where reality got reframed in real time, your nervous system becomes allergic to gray zones. Gray zones are not neutral, they're unstable. If it's emotional, it can be dismissed. That one stings. You learn that if you speak only from feeling, someone can invalidate it. You're being dramatic, you're too sensitive, you're just emotional. So you stop presenting arguments wrapped in feelings. You present facts, patterns, direct observations. You remove the emotional opening that allows someone to sidestep the issue. That's not coldness, that's strategic positioning. If it's polite, it can be ignored. Polite boundaries are requests. Firm boundaries are conditions. Could you maybe not do that is a suggestion. Don't do that is a parameter. Trauma teaches you that requests can be overridden. Conditions are harder to bypass, so you stop hinting. You stop layering your boundaries in sugar so no one feels uncomfortable. Because discomfort is cheaper than violation. You speak in statements, not suggestions. Hey, that doesn't work for me. This crosses the line. This is unfucking acceptable. There's no wiggle room in that language, and wiggle room is where exploitation lives. You draw lines instead of hinting at boundaries. Because hinted boundaries are testable. People test hints. They probe them. They lean on them. They interpret them generously in their own favor. Direct lines, though, those require a conscious decision to cross. And if someone crosses a clear line, you have data, not confusion. You don't soften your delivery because softness invites negotiation. Negotiation is fine in healthy systems. But trauma survivors learn that not all systems are healthy. Some systems use negotiation as erosion. Push a little, redefine a little, normalize a little, until the boundary disappears entirely. So you remove the erosion point. Some people are vague because they're nice. They genuinely don't want to offend. They don't want tension. They believe harmony is inherently good. Others are vague because they're cowards. They don't want accountability. They want flexibility later. They want the option to retreat from their own words. Trauma survivors don't care which one you are. Both are unsafe. Because from a survival perspective, intent doesn't matter as much as the outcome. Nice but unclear can still create damage. Cowardly and unclear obviously can. So your nervous system collapses them into one category, risk. That doesn't make you paranoid, it makes you efficient. You don't have the luxury of assuming good intent and absorbing the fallout if you're wrong. Your brain would rather appear harsh than be blindsided again. Direct language shifts power. When you speak clearly, you take control of the narrative. You define the terms, you define the boundary, you define the meaning. That threatens anyone who relies on ambiguity to maneuver, so they call you aggressive. Not because you attack them, because you remove their ability to reposition. And once your brain has learned that clarity protects you from distortion, it doesn't revert to softness just to preserve someone else's comfort. You don't distrust ambiguity because you're bitter. You distrust it because you've seen what hides inside of it. And once you've seen that, you don't unsee it. People might look at you and say you're aggressive, but you know what? You're not aggressive. You're interrupting denial. Aggression is about domination. Interruption is about disruption. Those are not the same thing. See, most environments survive on unspoken agreements. Every workplace, every family, every friend group, every institution, they all run on invisible contracts. Don't say it. Don't name it. Don't point at it. Smile and move on. There's always something sitting in the corner of the room that everybody sees but no one acknowledges. That could be the incompetent person, the manipulative dynamic, the double standard, the obvious contradiction, or the quiet resentment. And the group unconsciously agrees. We will not destabilize this by making it explicit. Why? Because explicit truth demands action, and action is uncomfortable. Trauma survivors don't trust unspoken rules. Unspoken rules are how bad situations fester. You've seen what happens when nobody names the issue. You've seen how dysfunction grows in silence. You've seen how problems become systems because no one had the spine to say the obvious thing early. So when you feel the tension in a room, you don't soothe it, you locate it, and you say it. That's not accurate. That doesn't make sense. That's not what fucking happened. This is the real goddamn issue. And suddenly, you're the fucking problem. Because you didn't violate the moral code, you violated the emotional truce. The psychology behind this is simple and brutal. Avoidance is how most people regulate emotion. Avoidance reduces anxiety in the short term. If you don't talk about it, it doesn't spike your nervous system. If you don't acknowledge the tensions, you don't have to feel it. If you don't name the contradiction, you don't have to resolve it. Avoidance buys peace, temporary peace. It's emotional anesthesia. So when you remove avoidance, you remove their anesthesia. You remove the numbing agent. Now they have to feel the awkwardness, the insecurity, the guilt, the incompetence, the instability, and your honesty feels like violence. Not because you attacked them, because you stripped away the buffer that was protecting them from their own discomfort. Their nervous system spikes, their heart rate increases, their defensiveness kicks in, their ego activates, and they look for a cause. You're the visible variable. This is projection. They feel destabilized, so they label you destabilizing. They feel exposed, so they call you aggressive. They feel uncomfortable, so they call you inappropriate. But what actually happened? You named reality. You said the thing that everyone else felt but didn't want to carry. You didn't make the room uncomfortable. The room was already uncomfortable. You just removed the blanket everyone was pretending was the floor. When you turn on the lights in a messy room, the light isn't the problem. The mess is. But the light gets blamed because it's the trigger. And here's the part trauma survivors instinctively understand. Unaddressed tension doesn't disappear. It accumulates. It leaks sideways into passive aggression. It explodes later in disproportionate ways. So you choose short-term discomfort over long-term rot. Most people choose the opposite. They would rather maintain emotional equilibrium than confront instability. You would rather confront instability than fake equilibrium. That's the difference. And it's lonely, because groups bond over shared avoidance. You break that bond when you refuse to participate. You don't get applause for truth, you get distance, get whispers, you get labeled too much. But here's the cold reality. Systems built on denial eventually collapse anyways. You just collapse them early. In early collapse, that feels like aggression to people invested in keeping that illusion intact. You're not aggressive, you're intolerant of unreality. And once you've survived environments where denial costs something real, you don't worship comfort anymore. You respect clarity, even if it makes the room go quiet. And now I'm going to introduce the most brutally honest, outspoken person I know, my wife, Jessie. How you doing?
I'm good.
All right, I'll let her pick up where we left off.
Trauma plus honesty often leads to selective withdrawal. Not depression, not antisocial personality, not you hate people. Efficiency. After trauma, your nervous system becomes expensive to run. Baseline arousal is higher. Scanning never fully turns off. You're tracking tone, posture, power dynamics, contradictions, exits. That costs energy. So your brain starts budgeting, and it runs a quiet calculation in every interaction. Is this real? Is this necessary? Is this safe? Is this reciprocal? Is this worth the expenditure? If the answer trends towards performance, your brain flags it as a bad investment. This interaction costs more energy than it's worth. That's not bitterness, that's conversation. Trauma survivors often develop what looks like detachment, but it's actually filtration. You stop explaining because explanation requires vulnerability, and vulnerability historically has not always paid off. You stop justifying because justification implies you owe the room your reasoning. And trauma rewires your relationship with obligation. You don't automatically feel obligated to soothe people anymore. You don't automatically feel obligated to over-clarify. You don't automatically feel obligated to make your internal world digestible.
And I'm sorry for all the background noise. Our dog Rampley wants to be in here with us too. You stop caring if you're understood. That line scares people. But here's what it actually means. You stop performing for validation. Before trauma, being understood might have equaled belonging. After trauma, being intact equals safety. If someone misunderstands you and it doesn't threaten your safety or stability, your nervous system shrugs. Because chasing understanding from the wrong audience is exhausting, and trauma survivors are allergic to exhaustion that doesn't yield security. This is where selective withdrawal shows up. You're still capable of connection, you still care, you still feel, but you don't distribute access evenly. Access becomes earned, reciprocity becomes required, authenticity becomes the price of admission, and that narrows the room. You didn't become isolated because you're broken. You became isolated because you stopped lying to fit in. You stopped laughing at things that weren't funny. You stopped nodding along to things that weren't true. You stopped pretending certain dynamics were fine. You stopped pretending you were less intense than you are. And once you remove the social glue of shared pretending, a lot of connections dissolve, because some relationships are built on mutual illusion. When you refuse illusion, those relationships don't have structural integrity. That doesn't mean you're superior. And I know a lot of my jokes my wife doesn't think is funny, right?
Right.
I mean, she'll say that's not funny. I mean, I'm not trying to be a comedian or anything. I'm just saying what's on my mind.
It means you change the currency. Most people trade in comfort. You trade in clarity. That drastically reduces volume. There's another layer people don't like to admit. Selective withdrawal is also a control strategy. If you can't trust the environment, you control your exposure to it. Less exposure equals fewer variables. Fewer variables equals fewer surprises. And trauma survivors hate surprises. So you shrink the social field, not out of fear, out of precision. From the outside, it looks like aloofness. From the inside, it feels like breathing easier. You're not avoiding people. You're avoiding unnecessary friction. And when you do engage, it's intentional, focused, often intense. Because if you're going to spend energy, it better matter. That's not antisocial. That's strategic. And the hard truth is this. When you stop lying to fit in, you lose the crowd, but you gain something quieter. Congruence. And for a nervous system that survived chaos, congruence feels safer than applause ever did.
Trauma didn't make you cruel, it made you intolerant to bullshit. You don't speak bluntly because you lack empathy. You speak bluntly because you've seen what empathy without boundaries turns into. You don't avoid small talk because you're antisocial. You avoid it because you don't have time for emotional cosplay. And if your honesty makes people uncomfortable, that's not a flaw. That's a diagnostic tool. It tells you who needs illusion to function, who survives on denial, and who can't stand being in a room where the truth doesn't whisper. You're not here to make people comfortable. Fuck their feelings. You're here because you survived something that stripped the padding off reality. That changes how you talk, how you listen, and who you tolerate. That's not a personality, that's adaptation. Remember, comfort is a narrative. Question it. I'm Stephen Daly, your host. I'll see you next time here on Daily Grind.